Chapter 8 is going to be about energy balance and body composition. Starting off with energy balance is energy in versus energy out, which means the calories you put into your body and the calories your body uses. If they are the same, then you should maintain your weight. If you're putting in more calories than your body uses, in general, you should gain weight. If you are putting in less than what your body uses, you should lose weight. Now, we are going to use that concept in order to do some calculations to determine if someone is going to be gaining or losing weight. And for that, I want you to know the key of 1 pound of fat is equal to 3,500 calories. We're going to come back to this number later on and use it for calculations. This is a machine that determines how many calories are in the food that we eat. If you'll notice, we have a little bit of food in this metal bowl, and then around the metal bowl we have a wire, which is going to be our heating element. Outside of this, we have water that is being measured with a thermometer. And what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and send heat through the wire, which is going to heat up that bowl of food. And the food inside of it is going to start getting warmer, it's going to start to burn, and as it does that, it's going to release heat, which will raise the temperature of the water. And for every degree Celsius that it raises the water, it is 1 kilogram of water that we're using. So for every degree Celsius that we raise the 1 kilogram of water, that is equal to 1 calorie. The reason that the heat change is equal to calories is because, remember, calories are a measure of energy, and heat is a form of energy as well. So basically, the thermometer is just measuring how much heat the food gives off, which tells us how much energy is in the food. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the different aspects of energy in, and then we'll look at energy out. So starting off, we want to look at certain things that influence energy in. There is the difference between hunger and appetite. Hunger is when your body physically needs food. Appetite is when you just feel like eating. So for example, eating a meal because you haven't eaten in hours and you're really hungry versus having dessert after you just had a big meal. That dessert would be eaten out of appetite and not out of hunger. So that is something that can be focused on if you're trying to control your energy in. Now, another thing is to look at the power of satiety and satiation. These are terms that I do want you to know. Satiation is the power of something to stop you from eating, so to cause your meal to end. So you're in the middle of eating and then all of a sudden you start to feel full. You decide, okay, I'm done eating. That feeling is satiation. And then how long you feel that full feeling until you want to eat again, that is satiety. So satiation is the feeling of fullness that you feel during a meal. Satiety is how long the feeling of fullness lasts after a meal. And we want to choose foods that have both of them. Because let's say that we have something that is high satiety, it can keep us full for a long time, but it's not high satiation. Well, what's going to happen is that we're going to keep eating for a long time before we realize that we're full. So even though it's going to keep us full for a long time, we probably overate. So we want to make sure that it has both satiety and satiation. Now, protein is the nutrient that has the highest level of satiety, which means it's going to keep you feeling full for the longest period of time. But it's also a good idea to incorporate some fat, because fat can also contribute to that feeling of satiety as well. Now, when it comes to satiation, that's going to be where fiber helps us out. We want to make sure we're including some fiber in our meals and our snacks, because fiber will help get you to that full feeling quickly so that you can stop eating before you overeat. Another thing to consider is energy density. So energy density is basically the concept of how many calories are packed into this food. How dense is the food in calories? And here we have a couple of pictures demonstrating this concept. If you'll take a look at the one on the left, this is showing us the same portion size of peanuts and popcorn, so the same amount. But the peanuts are going to cost you 837 calories, even though the same amount of popcorn will cost you only 55 calories. And the reason for this is the peanuts are more energy dense. There is a larger amount of calories that is packed into that amount of peanuts than if there is popcorn. If you take a look at the picture on the right, here we are looking at it in a different way, same concept though, where we have 100 calories worth of peanuts and 100 calories worth of popcorn. But since the peanuts are more energy dense, it only takes a little bit of peanuts before you hit the 100-calorie mark, whereas you could eat a lot more popcorn for that 100 calories. So in this kind of situation, if you are somebody who struggles with feeling restricted when you're managing your calories, it might be a good idea to choose the popcorn because you would be able to eat a larger amount of food for that same amount of calories than if you chose the more energy-dense peanuts. So these are just some things to keep in mind when you are choosing the foods that you're including in your diet as a way to help manage your calories. This shows us the steps of satiety and satiation in picture form. So we start off with step 1 on the top left, where you're hungry, your stomach is growling, letting you know that it needs food. So you go out and get some food, you start eating, and as you see in the number 3 in purple, the stomach is starting to fill up. At the point where your stomach is full, you're going to feel that feeling of satiation and stop eating. Now, several hours later, you're going to feel hungry again, and you're going to want to go and get some more food. But how long it takes for you to get that hungry feeling again is what we call satiety. On the energy out portion, we have a few different things that our body is going to use calories for. It is going to be basal metabolism, physical activity, your food consumption, and adaptation. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at each one of these individually. So starting off with your basal metabolism. Basal metabolism is what our body uses most of the calories for, and this is what our body needs to fuel its vital functions, the basic processes of life that are needed to keep you alive. So it fuels your heart pumping, your lungs breathing, those types of things that are necessary for you to stay alive are your basal metabolism. Then we have physical activity. This includes just walking to your car, taking notes, that type of energy, but it also counts as going to the gym and having a workout. All of that is included in our physical activity category. Next, we have thermic effect of food. This is the amount of energy it takes for our body to process the food that we eat. So we do get energy from food, but first we need to process it, and that requires energy as well. Lastly, we have our adaptive thermogenesis. This is something that is whenever your body needs to adapt to an unusual circumstance and work a little bit harder than normal. So let's say that you're feeling sick, you have some kind of infection. Your body is going to be working hard to get rid of that infection. So it's going to be using more calories. If you're in a cold environment and your body needs to warm you up, it's going to be using more calories for that. So anytime your body needs to adapt to an unusual circumstance and work a little harder, that's what we call our adaptive thermogenesis. Now this over here shows us the components of our energy expenditure. Remember, we learned energy expenditure is calculated as estimated energy requirements, your EER. And you'll notice that even though we mentioned 4 categories, we only have 3 of them here. And the reason for that is because adaptive thermogenesis is really hard to account for. It's something that we can't really predict. We don't know how often you're going to be sick, how hard your body's going to have to work, how cold are you going to be. All of those little things are really hard to predict. And the amount of calories that go towards that are really small anyway, that it's insignificant to try to predict it in the first place. So we do use some calories for adaptive thermogenesis, but it's not included in our calculation for our estimated energy requirement. Now we know that energy in and energy out can cause us to gain or lose weight depending on the balance. We can go ahead and take a look at how we're going to determine if we have a healthy body in the first place, or if we do want to alter our intake or our output in order to manage our weight. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at a few methods that we can use to determine this. The first one is called your body mass index, or BMI. Your BMI is a ratio of weight to height, and I have the calculation there for you if you'd like to plug it in for yourself. But the numbers that we're looking for are 18.5 to 24.9. That is the healthy range for the BMI. In the US, we actually have not much of the population in that healthy range. If you'll notice here, we have less than a third of the US that are in the healthy BMI, and the rest of them are either overweight, obese, or underweight. Now, BMI isn't something that is going to give us the full picture. It's just comparing height and weight, but it does have its own basis in science as well. The basis that BMI has is based off of mortality or the risk of death. So basically they did a bunch of studies where they looked at the risk of death for these individuals and what their BMIs were. And the risk of death was based off of their health condition. And what they found is that individuals who were at a BMI of about 18.5 to 24.9 had the lowest risk of death when it comes to their health. And you'll notice that in this graph over here. As we start to drop below 20, around the 20 range, it starts to go higher when it comes to death risk. And as we move past 25, it starts to increase as well. So even though BMI doesn't give us the full picture, it does have its basis, so it's a good starting point in determining whether you are at a healthy point. One thing that the BMI is missing is telling us what the weight is composed of. We could have two individuals who have the same weight and the same height, but one of them exercises regularly and eats healthy, and the other one never exercises and always is eating unhealthy foods. They're not going to both be in the same health condition, but we wouldn't know that just using BMI. And so we want to look a little bit closer and look at what their weight is made of. Is it primarily muscle or is it primarily fat? For the individual who wasn't working out, it was probably going to be primarily from fat. Whereas the individual with the same BMI who was working out regularly, even though she has the same weight, her weight is probably going to be coming primarily from muscle. So that is something that we want to look at. And we do have ranges that we want to try to stay within, or goals that we want to try to meet for our body fat. If you look over here, for the male 20 to 39 years of age, the recommended body fat is 18 to 21%, but in the US, they're actually averaging 26%. Females also aren't where they should be. The recommended for females aged 20 to 39 is 23 to 26%, but the actual average for females of that age is 38%. So that is something that we need to work on. One thing that you may notice is that the ranges for females are higher than they are for men, and that's because women need more fat in their body to maintain their reproductive system. Now, another important thing is to know where the fat is located. So sometimes we can fit within the limit of our body fat percentage, but our fat could be located in different places in our body where it is actually bad for our health. Now, in this picture that you see over here, the fat is in yellow. And you'll notice in the picture on the left, the individual has some yellow right underneath their skin, some of it surrounding their organs, but it's a very small amount. That's somebody who would have a healthy weight. Now, if this person continued to gain weight, as you see in the second picture on the right, they're going to start gaining fat in all of those areas. So now we see a much larger chunk of fat right underneath the skin, but also surrounding the organs. The fat right underneath the skin is called subcutaneous fat. The one surrounding the organs is visceral fat. And visceral fat is the one we're concerned about, because if you continue to gain weight and it gets stored around your organs can be affected by that. And so that's something that we want to avoid. And that's something we call central obesity. When someone is gaining a bunch of weight in their abdominal area, that's called central obesity. And it comes with higher health risks when it comes to diabetes, heart disease, because the abdominal area is where the majority of our organs are. So if you're storing a bunch of fat there, it tells us that likely a lot of that fat is surrounding your organs. Now, remember we talked about lipoprotein lipase. It's the enzyme that helps store fat. And we said men have more of it in their upper body, so their body stores fat there more efficiently. Women have more of it in their lower body, so the women's body stores fat more in its lower region. Now, that's actually a benefit that women have. Now that we know that it's dangerous to store fat in the upper body, you know that men are at a higher risk for those health conditions because that's where they tend to store most of their weight. So people who have an apple shape rather than a pear shape are going to be at a higher health risk. The pear shape is actually not as detrimental because you have less fat in the abdominal area where the organs are located. One way that we can measure this is by using waist circumference. The recommendation is for women's waist to be lower than 35 inches and for men less than 40 inches. Anything above this is considered central obesity and is increasing the risk of health conditions. Next, we're going to talk about the other end of the spectrum, which is when someone is underweight or in particular having an eating disorder. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the most common eating disorders, starting with anorexia nervosa. This is when someone refuses to maintain a healthy weight. They are restricting themselves very, very tightly, either by having an extremely low calorie diet or exercising excessively to get rid of all of the calories. But either way, they're making sure that their body doesn't have many calories left to run off of. Now, this is something that can start to wear down the body, especially the heart, and can eventually lead to death. The next one is bulimia nervosa, and this is when someone has binge episodes. Binging is referred to as a feeling of lack of control when it comes to food and eating extremely excessively in that moment of lacking control. So these are individuals who will consume thousands and thousands of calories within minutes, and they just feel like they can't stop until it's over, and then they feel horrible about it. So they go on and purge. Purging is getting rid of the food somehow, whether it be vomiting or using laxatives, that they get rid of the food. So this binging isn't just somebody eating a little bit more than usual. It's extremely large amounts of food, and the main factor is that they feel out of control. The last one is our binge eating disorder. Binge eating disorder is similar to bulimia in terms of the binging process, but the difference is that they don't purge the food, so they don't get rid of it. So these individuals have episodes where they feel out of control and eat thousands of calories, but since they don't get rid of it, these people will actually be overweight or obese. So not all people with an eating disorder are going to be really thin. Female athlete triad is something that is actually seen very commonly in a lot of sports, and it is when we combine three factors: an eating disorder, amenorrhea, and osteoporosis. And I'm going to go ahead and walk you through what each one of these means. So these individuals have a very extreme eating disorder where they are losing a bunch of body fat. They're becoming really thin. And the problem with that is, remember, we said that women need the body fat to maintain their reproductive system. The reason for that is because the hormone estrogen, which regulates reproduction, is in body fat. So when they lose all of their body fat, they're getting rid of all of their estrogen. Without estrogen, they're not going to get their menstrual cycle. And that's what amenorrhea is. Amenorrhea means the lack of a menstrual cycle. Another thing that estrogen does is it protects your bones from excessive breakdown. And so if you don't have estrogen, you have more vulnerable bones, which can lead to osteoporosis. So those are how those three connect, and that's what we call the female athlete triad. Another common thing among the athletes is muscle dysmorphia. This one is more common among the male athletes, and it is when they view themselves in a very distorted way. They have a very distorted body image where they look in the mirror and they view themselves as extremely scrawny when they're actually very built and muscular. And so they keep eating in a disordered manner, exercising excessively to try to form their body in the way that they want when it is actually out of control. Lastly, we want to know how we're going to treat these conditions, and in general, the treatment for eating disorders altogether, regardless of what the eating disorder is, we want to follow a multidisciplinary team approach. What this means is we want somebody from each discipline. We want a psychiatrist, we want a dietitian, a doctor, because an eating disorder isn't just about making them eat again. It's not just about basically getting them to a healthy weight. We also want to know what caused this in the first place and try to fix that so it doesn't happen again. We also want a doctor to help them with any health conditions that they have because of their eating disorder.